What's up, friends? The last handful of weeks have seen the majority of motorcycle manufacturers releasing their new for 2021 motorcycle models. And there's a lot that we can be excited about, but there's one bike in particular that I have really been gravitating towards, and that's the MV Agusta Super Veloce Alpine Limited Edition. It's a little bit of a mouthful, whatever. So MV Agusta got together with Alpine to celebrate the A110, which, fun fact, I designed the 1/64th Hot Wheels version of the Alpine A110, so I'm a little bit biased. But Alpine worked with MV Agusta and they combined design spirits, if you will. So you'll see this new Super Veloce take on some additional A110 inspired design cues and livery, right? So you got the silver and blue livery that I think is really beautiful. Not everybody's a fan of this neo-retro style that MV Agusta's gone with for the Super Veloce. I personally think that they've done a really nice job. Whatever you think, grab a pen, pencil, or a drawing utensil because you and I are dropping lines. So for this sketch, I'm using a series of Copic markers. I'm using a C1, a C2, a C4, and a C6. And I start the sketch off with the C1, and as I usually do, I start by blocking in the ground line and blocking in the wheelbase, getting the wheels put in the right proportion to accurately capture the bike. It is super important. I'm also using, or have a set of Prismacolors that I will be using as well to help refine the line work and really just tighten things up later in the sketch. But once I get the wheelbase blocked in, I block in the headlight, which is a super iconic part of this particular motorcycle. And I think the wheel's placed in not quite, the rear wheel isn't quite placed in the right spot. So you'll see me continually kind of noodle on that and try to get that placed right and sized right. And as I get into the tank, you'll notice that there's a ton of beautiful form in that tank section that I absolutely love. And it's part of the reason why I really like these MV Agustas and these Italian bikes is that the attention to form that you'll see around that tank section and even through the fairings and tail. Really just beautiful. And then blocking in that tail, or blocking in the seat rather, obviously the rider needs a place to put their butt, so we incorporate that. And the tail section is really reminiscent of the Desmos Adichie Ducati, that there's really pronounced S-curve. Whether or not they were referencing that bike, who knows, but I like the look. And then starting out by building some thickness into that really bold front fairing shape, or side fairing shape. It's really contrasted nicely because it's painted in this Alpine-ish silver, and then the rest of the bike is blue, so those fairings really pop off. And then you've got the trellis frame here that is really quite beautiful on the MV Agusta. That's painted in matte, so it kind of blends in, but it's still pronounced enough where you can see it. Really a beautiful structural detail. And then coming back to the tank and starting to block in some more of that tank detail and getting the grips in there. Now this bike it comes with bar end mirrors, which is a nice touch. And the strap, the leather strap on the gas tank is, I'll call it super luxurious for a motorcycle and really nice attention to detail. And then here I am again trying to get that rear wheel in the right spot. At the moment, the sketch feels a little bit under-tired, meaning the wheels are a little bit small, both in the front and the rear. So I'll come in later with some ellipse guides and really blow those wheels up just a little bit to make sure that the bike feels like it has enough tire to really grab the road. We don't want our bike to look pigeon-toed, as they might say, or just under-tired. And then you see we've been working back and forth throughout the bike, throughout the sketch. So this bike has a it's got a single exhaust on the left-hand side and 2 exhausts on the right-hand side, because it's a 3-cylinder, and for whatever reason, that's how they've chosen, or at least Aero Exhaust Systems has chosen to execute their exhaust, which is really cool. And I haven't heard this in real life, but from all the videos and from the certain MVGUSs that I have heard in person, I can imagine this bike sounds absolutely fantastic. And here we are coming back in with the ellipse guides to establish to tighten up those wheels, and I use a little bit larger ellipse to get that wheel feeling properly proportioned with the rest of the bike. So I make the wheels a little bit bigger with those ellipse guides. And then I come back in with our C2 Copic marker and begin blocking out certain darker areas at the underside of the tires, the inside of the front fairings where you see the radiators, and I start to add some detail through the engine, right, to start to get that trellis framework to read. And this is still pretty light at this point, right, because I'm starting light and then building up so that I can rework and fix things as I go along, which is super important. We want to give ourselves a little bit of freedom to make adjustments as we're working through the sketch, you know, in case, like we've seen here, we get the wheels wrong, for instance. We want to be able to mask that later, and if we start by using a super dark marker, it'll be hard to fix that later. So we want to start light, then build to our darker darks. And here we pick up a Prismacolor pencil once we've got the majority of our C2 blocked in, and we really start to add some more defined line work. And again, this bike is really beautiful. That side fairing is, you know, quite pronounced. It has a really elegant S-curve on the back side of that fairing, and again, it really jumps off the bike with that blue and silver livery. Now, I think that I've made the headlight a little bit high on this particular sketch, but you know, I think we can get away with it and stick with what we've got. I think we'll be okay. But if I were to overlay this, I'd move that down just a little bit, because this bike has a really fast front end, which gives it a super sporty look. And then it has this kind of a wing or a diffuser on the top half of that screen. Some people have said it looks a little bit like a tiara. So be it. I think it's a pretty cool detail. And again, just continuing to add in some line work so that we can follow the line work later as we add some darker values and not get lost in the sketch or lose the details. Right? Because the Copic markers have a fairly fat point, it's hard to get these finer details. So we come in with a Prismacolor and start to block those details in so that they read. Again, putting the grips in. This bike has a quick shift up and down, which is pretty cool, and I think that MVGUSs have had that for quite a while. And this 3-cylinder puts out 147 horsepower, right, with 800 cc's. So it's a pretty fast bike, right? It's not no slouch at all. And those 3 cylinders are quite nice because it gives you low end torque and get you into that high revs and higher speeds as well, unlike something like a big V twin or an inline 4, where you don't really have that low range torque that you get a little bit more of with this 3-cylinder. So I can't wait to get my hands on one of these and actually ride one on the road. Super excited for that moment. And then we come in and we continue to block out all the details, and we've given ourselves a guideline to follow with the marker, right, with the C1 and the C2. So this is essentially like drawing by number at this point, because we've given ourselves an underlay with the marker. And I am using a more proper marker paper for this sketch versus our last sketch, which was a Harley Davidson, where I was using regular printer paper, and it's a little bit, you know, you don't get the same result that you get with a marker paper. So for this, I'm using a proper Bienfang marker paper, and I think we get a little bit better result. And it allows us to work the marker a little bit more. It doesn't sink in immediately, so we can blend a little bit more easily. So there are some clear benefits to working with the proper tool, if you will. And obviously I've got this bike using a reference image, and it's up on a bike stand, so it gives it this really cool look, right, with this race look when you don't have the kickstand down and you're just up there on the bike stand, which is appropriate for this very sporty bike. And coming in freehand and just adding some details around the front discs and the front rims, making sure that we're not missing anything. And they've got a really nice detail on that fender support where it's got an homage to the Italian and French flags, which is just a nice little hidden detail. Not so hidden if you're looking for it. And at this point I come back in with a C4 and C2, and I'm blending them and trying to get some of this darker value blocked in. Because eventually we want all of this beautiful alpine blue is quite dark in value, and since we're only using grayscale markers here, we want to push that front fairing, the tank, and the tail into a little bit darker value so that side fairing can really stand out. So we're starting to do that with our C4, and obviously we want our tires in the front to be super punchy because it's a front 3/4. So we want to start our sketch off. We want the eye to essentially be treated to more contrast up front, and then it slowly fades off towards the rear. So you won't see me using the C6 or much of the C4 towards the rear section of this bike, because I want to keep most of the contrast towards the front of the bike. What this does adds a little bit of extra drama and some slight atmospheric perspective. An atmospheric perspective, if you're not familiar with it, is essentially when you look out into the distance, things become lighter because there's more atmosphere between you and the things that are farther away, so you don't get as much contrast. So it just creates this kind of sense of depth. And now I come back in and I'm using the C2 and the C1 to start blocking in a little bit of a ground shadow with some reflectiveness. And now we come in with the C6 and really start to punch out certain details around the front, right? Around the wheels, making sure that the fenders stand off and that we really get this side fender to jump off that radiator section there. Really want this to look like it's standing off the bike and not just kind of blending in. And a lot of this bike is in like kind of a matte black, if you will. Again, finishing up that nice leather strap on top. And because all these things are kind of in a matte black, we want to make sure that we push them into a darker value range. So you'll see me shortly here start to put the engine into using the C4 and more of the C6 to really get a darker read for some of these darker elements. But as you can see, we're starting to get a little bit more contrast up front, and that side fender is starting to jump off. And to assist in that, I'm also coming in with the Prismacolor again with a nicely sharpened point, and just adding in some finishing details to make sure that everything is reading properly. I want to punch out more fine detail now, like up around this windscreen, making sure that the different elements are delineated properly. Obviously your fuel tank, and really getting that curve on that front fairing dialed in. Right, adding a little bit more darks towards the bottom there to make sure that the bottom of the bike feels like it's nice and grounded. Coming through again with a little bit more C4 and some light C6 just to set off some of that front wheel. and it's tightening up again with our Prismacolor. And we can't forget that the Alpine A10 logo there, so we need to put that on the side to make sure that we're paying proper homage to the partnership of Alpine and MV Agusta. And then you finish it off with your signature, and hope you've enjoyed. If you found any value here, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.